Rachel Reeves stood up in Parliament and delivered news that every single person who owns, rents, or wants to buy property in this country needs to understand. The government's own forecaster, the Office for Budget Responsibility, downgraded UK economic growth to 1.1% in 2026. Unemployment is forecast to peak at 5.3%, a 5-year high. And yet the official line was that everything is on track. Today, I am connecting the dots that nobody in the mainstream media is connecting for you. What the spring statement actually means for UK house prices, mortgage rates, the rental market, and every decision you need to make about property in 2026. Buyers, sellers, landlords, renters, all of you need to hear this. Let's get into it. Let us start with the economic backdrop because you cannot understand where the property market is going without understanding what the wider economy is doing underneath it. On March 3, 2026, the OBR published its spring forecasts alongside Reeves's statement. GDP growth for this year has been cut to 1.1%. That is down from 1.4% forecast in November, and it represents the weakest growth since the post-pandemic recovery years. More significantly, unemployment is now forecast to peak at 5.3% in 2026, up from 4.75% in 2025. The previous November forecast was already concerning at 4.9%. The new number is substantially worse. Here is what nobody is saying plainly. Unemployment at 5.3% means hundreds of thousands more people without income. It means mortgage stress rising. It means fewer buyers able to qualify for loans. It means tenants unable to pay rents. These are not abstract economic forecasts. They are the conditions that determine whether your property holds its value, whether your buyer can complete, and whether your tenant stays. The only partial offset is inflation. The OBR has lowered its inflation forecast to 2.3% for 2026, down from 2.5% predicted in November. Lower inflation gives the Bank of England room to keep cutting rates. But here is the problem. With the Middle East conflict driving energy prices higher this week, even the OBR's own report flagged that inflation could accelerate again. The Bank of England held rates at 3.75% at its February meeting. Rate cut expectations are now more cautious than they were at the start of the year. The easing cycle is happening, but more slowly and less predictably than most property forecasts built in. So what does all of this mean for house prices specifically? Let me run through every major forecaster and then tell you what I actually think they are missing. Rightmove forecasts prices up 2% nationally in 2026. Nationwide expects 2 to 4%. Halifax says 1 to 3%. Zoopla is the most cautious at 1.5%. Savills sits at 2% with much stronger growth projected from 2027 onwards. Capital Economics is the outlier, projecting 3.5% by the end of 2026, arguing lower inflation and improved lending criteria will push growth above the consensus. Here is what every single one of these forecasts has in common. They were built before this week's spring statement. They were built before the OBR revised unemployment up by nearly half a percentage point. And they were built before the Middle East conflict added a new inflationary wildcard to the picture. That does not mean they are wrong. The structural drivers supporting modest price growth are real. Wage growth is still outpacing price growth in much of the country, improving affordability in real terms. Mortgage rates have been falling and are expected to fall further. The house price-to-income ratio hit its lowest level in over a decade in December 2025, according to Halifax. And housing supply remains critically short, with planning approvals at their lowest level since 1979. But the risk is asymmetric. If unemployment hits 5.3% or higher before rate cuts gain proper traction, forced selling increases, buyer pools shrink, and the modest growth forecasts become flat or falling. The market does not need a catastrophe to underperform. It just needs the economic conditions to stay difficult for longer than expected. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. I am covering the UK property market and economic conditions every week, connecting the data to what it actually means for your decisions. It costs nothing, and you will not miss what comes next. Now, let us talk about where prices are actually moving right now, because the national average is hiding a story that is far more interesting. Official Land Registry data for December 2025 shows UK house prices up 2.4% annually to an average of £270,000. But that national number conceals dramatic regional variation that matters enormously depending on where you are. The Northeast recorded 6.8% annual growth, the strongest of any English region. The Northwest delivered 4.1%, Yorkshire and Humber 3.7%. These are genuinely healthy markets where wage growth, affordability, and regeneration investment are combining to create real demand. At the other end, London recorded minus 1.2% annually, the only major region in England where prices are falling. East Anglia is the only other region in official decline. Southern England broadly is flat across the past 12 months, according to Zoopla's February 2026 data. What is driving that north-south split? Three things. First, affordability. Price-to-income ratios in the north are 4 to 5 times earnings. In London and the southeast, they are 9 to 16 times. When mortgage rates rise or wages slow, the more stretched markets feel it first and hardest. Second, regeneration investment. Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Newcastle, and Birmingham all have multi-billion-pound infrastructure pipelines confirmed and underway. That investment creates employment, which creates tenant demand, which creates buyer demand. Third, the landlord exodus is concentrated in the south. As landlords sell up in London and the home counties, they are adding supply to sales markets that already have weak demand. That combination of more supply and fewer buyers pushes prices down. Here is the specific data you need if you are thinking about buying or selling in 2026. Zoopla's February data shows sellers bringing properties to market at the highest monthly rate in a decade. 6% more homes listed than the same period last year and rising. That supply surge benefits buyers with more negotiating power than at any point since before the pandemic. But it also means sellers who price at 2022 levels are simply not selling. Properties listed above market value are sitting unsold, and the longer they sit, the more the seller eventually has to reduce. Average sale times have lengthened. The proportion of sellers achieving their full asking price has fallen. Rightmove data shows asking price reductions are more common now than in any year since 2019. In that environment, buyers have leverage they have not had for years, and sellers need to be realistic about what leverage actually means on the other side of the negotiation. Now, the mortgage picture, because this is where the economic crosscurrents hit property buyers most directly. Bank of England base rate is 3.75% as of March 2026. Average 2-year fixed residential mortgage rate is 4.25%. Average 5-year fixed is 4.4% according to Rightmove and Moneyfacts data. Best available deals are lower, with some lenders offering 5-year fixes below 3.8% for buyers with large deposits. The direction is downward. Markets expect 1 to potentially 3 further Bank of England cuts in 2026, which would take the base rate to between 3.25% and 3%. Every cut filters through to mortgage pricing, improving affordability incrementally. Moneyfacts data from January showed average rates falling to their lowest point in 4 years. But here's the complication introduced by yesterday's spring statement. The OBR flagged Middle East conflict as a significant upward risk to inflation. Capital economics analysts noted directly that if energy prices stay elevated, gilt yields rise, and mortgage rates could end up higher than currently forecast. The rate cut timeline that everyone is planning around could be pushed back. That does not mean rates are rising. It means the pace of improvement is less certain than it was a week ago. For anyone with a mortgage deal expiring in the next 6 months, the practical advice has not changed. Start the remortgage process now. Rolling onto the standard variable rate, currently averaging 7.15%, while waiting for a better moment is a guaranteed way to pay hundreds of pounds more every single month. Lock in a deal, and most products allow you to renegotiate if rates fall significantly before your completion date. Before we get to what this means for buyers and sellers specifically, The rental market deserves its own section because for millions of people in this country, that is the more immediate reality. The UK rental market is not recovering. It is still broken, and the spring statement confirmed nothing is changing. Rents rose 5.5% nationally over the past year, according to the ONS. In some cities and postcodes, the increases were significantly higher. The average UK rent is now £1,354 per month, which, on the average median weekly wage of £728, represents a squeeze that is mathematically unsustainable for a growing proportion of renters. The supply side is not improving. The RICS residential survey showed landlord instructions in negative territory throughout 2025. Private landlords are leaving the market due to Section 24, higher stamp duty surcharges, and now the Renters' Rights Act coming in May. The build-to-rent sector has strong investor appetite, but viability problems are slowing delivery. The government's planning reform agenda has not yet translated into significantly higher build rates. Planning approvals hit their lowest level since 1979 in late 2024. Here is the number that should make every renter and every policymaker uncomfortable. 131,000 households are in temporary accommodation right now. In 2024, 1,611 people died homeless. Councils are spending £2.7 billion annually on emergency housing placements. These are not statistics. They are the direct consequence of a rental market where supply has been deliberately and systematically choked for a decade while demand kept growing. Savills projects UK rents to rise 12% in total over the 4 years to 2029. JLL forecasts 2.5% rental growth in 2026 alone. None of that growth will come because the government has solved the housing crisis. It will come because there are not enough homes, and the political will to fix that does not exist in any meaningful form. Let me now address the specific questions I know most of you watching this are sitting with. If you are a first-time buyer, 2026 may be the most favorable entry conditions in several years, but it is not risk-free. Affordability is genuinely improving. The house price-to-income ratio is at its lowest in a decade. Lenders are loosening criteria. First-time buyer market share is above its long-run average. The risk is buying at the top of your affordability range just as unemployment rises and job security deteriorates. If your income is secure and your deposit is solid, the conditions are supportive. If you are stretching to the limit and your job is in a sector facing headwinds, this is not the moment to overextend. If you are selling in 2026, the single most important decision you will make is your asking price. Supply is surging. Buyer demand is running 6% below this time last year in some areas. In that market, an overpriced listing does not just take longer to sell, it stigmatizes the property. Buyers assume something is wrong with it. Price for where the market is today and you will sell. Price for where it was 2 years ago, and you will watch your listing go stale while your neighbors negotiate with motivated buyers at realistic prices. If you are a homeowner holding for the long term, the OBR forecasts give you a clear picture of the medium-term trajectory: 1.1% GDP growth in 2026. Then 1.6% in 2027 and 2028. The pain is concentrated in this year. From 2027 onwards, if the OBR is right, improving economic conditions, falling rates, and rising wages should push property values upward more meaningfully. Savills is projecting 24.5% cumulative growth by 2029. That 5-year horizon is the one that matters for most homeowners, not the next 12 months. Here is the bottom line on the UK property market in 2026. The official story is modest growth, improving affordability, and gradual recovery. The real story is more complicated. A slowing economy, rising unemployment, and a new inflationary risk from the Middle East mean the modest growth forecasts are built on assumptions that are already being revised downward. The North-South divide is not narrowing, it is widening. The rental crisis is not improving. The planning system is not fixing itself. But there are genuine opportunities inside all of that. First-time buyers with stable incomes and realistic expectations. Investors moving into northern cities where fundamentals support both yield and growth. Sellers willing to price for reality rather than nostalgia. The market rewards people who read the data honestly and punishes everyone who is waiting for conditions that are not coming back. The spring statement landed yesterday. The OBR's numbers are uncomfortable. But uncomfortable data is the most useful kind because it tells you exactly where the risk is. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of how this unfolds. I will see you in the next one.